awesome. Thank you, all of you too.
Good luck, y'all. Welcome to the bar.
Mr. G. How's it going?
That's all right.
More stretch, stretch. Not, I didn't say leave, I said stretch. How you doing? Pacing myself out of this thing. I'm pacing myself out of
That's the
this.
only way to do it.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to be talking now about building a law practice, and we have one of my favorite trial lawyers in South Carolina. He's a classmate of mine. We were in the same study group, and a lot of those lawyers in that study group when we were in law school gone on and become great trial lawyers themselves. Gedney Howe is a graduate of the University of South Carolina, undergraduate and the School of Law in 1973. He went to practice with his daddy, who was the dean of the bar at that time. He has Martindale Hubbell's highest rating and best lawyers in America listing. He's a member of many of the fellows a fellow in many of the organizations that are honorary societies. He's represented the South Carolina Senate in reapportionment litigation. He's received a number of outstanding judgments and settlements, one against the United States government and the Federal Tort Claims Act arising out of medical malpractice for $6 million, and then against the United States Coast Guard in the amount of $19 million. He is one of our most sought-after speakers, and I think you will understand why. Please give a warm welcome to our friend Gedney Howe.
Welcome to the bar. I think you're going to have a good time. I'm going to talk with you all a little bit about setting up a practice. And before we start talking about the substance of setting up a practice, I'm going to give you a little broad look at the practice as a whole and narrow it down to what we're going to be talking about. The bar breaks down into two primary groups: people lawyers and institutional lawyers. There's one thing that separates these two groups. Institutional lawyers would be you represent State Farm, you represent the University of South Carolina, you represent one of the institutions locally. You got a business entity as a client, as opposed to people lawyers. People lawyers are generally criminal lawyers, personal injury lawyers on the plaintiff side. Right? They have individuals for clients. Now, what is the big difference between these two? There's a dramatic difference in the approach to every case, depending on which one of these groups you work with, and that is how you get paid. Certainly an important element, and as time passes, it will become more and more important in your life, all right? Now, how do institutional lawyers get paid? They get paid by the hour. Carpenters get paid by the hour, ditch diggers get paid by the hour, and institutional lawyers get paid by the hour. And their rise within the hierarchy is you get paid more per hour. You're a $200 an hour lawyer, you're a $400 an hour lawyer, all right? And that's all a function of what the traffic will bear, but that's a per hour rate. People lawyers get paid a totally different way. On civil cases, you get paid on a contingency fee basis, generally a third. But if it's a products case or a malpractice case, which are harder and more expensive to do, you generally charge 40% of the amount recovered. And you work that out with the client, get a contract entered into, etc. Then you got criminal lawyers. Criminal lawyers and personal injury lawyers are both people lawyers. Generally, a guy like me who does PI work, personal injury work, also does criminal work, because same people who get in wrecks steal stuff, okay? All right? Not all the time, but there's a heavy overlap there, okay? So my pitch, the part of my practice, the part I'm going to talk to you all about is how to develop a people practice. Now, that's particularly important right now because based on what I see in the marketplace, it is not a friendly place to new lawyers. You know, workman's compensation lawyers are saying, we got nothing to do, nobody's building anything, all right? There's nobody getting hurt. If somebody drops a hammer on their toe and breaks their toe, the guy keeps it a secret so he doesn't want to lose his job as opposed to filing a workman's compensation claim, all right? People who do labor law, well, hell, you can fire anybody you want to right now for any reason in the world. All you got to do is say there's a reduction in force. You don't have sexual abuse, sexual firings. You don't have retaliatory firings because there's all the justification in the world in the marketplace. Those people got nothing to do. Well, if you're all you got to do is ride through a suburb, you can see that the real estate lawyers ain't got nothing to do because nothing's selling. All right? So the marketplace is not a friendly marketplace. You just might have to go out there and set up your office. All right? And it's not a bad thing to do. Or associate yourself with a small firm. And when you do, that's what we're going to talk about, how to be successful either on your own or with a small firm. What are the traits? What are the things you need to personify in yourself to make it work better? Now, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about criminal work first. Criminal work is generally charged on a lump sum fee. One of the places people abuse their own clients, and it's not sort of a conscious abuse, but it is clients come to you with criminal problems, and it may be their own or it may be one of their children's criminal problems. They are in a panic. They just got out of jail on bond, or they're still in jail and you're trying to get them out on bond. They are very, very vulnerable. And lawyers do one of two things, both of which are wrong. Don't do these things. All right? They say, it's going to be okay. I can handle it. That's a damn lie, okay? I can handle it. What are they saying? Bring me, say it, the money. And I'm going to take care of this. Or they say, oh, it's just awful. Oh, gloom and doom. I don't know if anything can be done. But bring me the money and I'll see what I can do. All right? Now, they'll fall for that right then because they're that vulnerable, they're that afraid, and they're not thinking clearly enough to say, this guy's manipulating the hell out of me. It probably ain't as bad as he says it is, or it isn't as good as he says it is, it's somewhere in between. But they're going to catch on before the case is over. All right? They're going to catch on before the case is over. And when they catch on, one, they're extremely difficult to handle as a client because they don't trust you. Surprise, surprise. All right? Number two, they become more demanding, and they're very hard to represent, and it's all your fault. But the worst thing they do is they tell other people you're a liar. All right? Because you are. You misled your own client. Now, in our world, manipulation is a valuable commodity. I'm in the manipulation business. I do it all the time. But I do it to the other guy. I don't do it to my own client. I manipulate him. I mislead him. I steer him down the wrong path. I do all that sort of stuff. That's what I get paid to do. All right? But not to my own client, to the other guy. We're going to talk about, when we get into the personal injury stuff, about how you generate more business. But at this point, I want to show you, this is how you cut off business. All right? This is how, in the supply and demand world, in that marketplace of free ideas, they say bad stuff against you, and it hurts, and it sticks with you forever. Now, let's say, and I want y'all, when I tell you this stuff, it's for the nugget of the story, but it's also for you to pick up a sense of how, when you're first out of here, how do you get along with people? How do you interact? What are you trying to accomplish? All right? The first thing and the most upfront thing you got to do with somebody in a criminal case is you got to charge them a fee, okay? And you want the fee to be reasonable, maybe on the high side of reasonable, but your world is a very different world right now. And the example I like to use is the parking lot, all right? I got a parking lot, my business parking lot, and you know what is it? What does it say every morning at the front on it? Full. Okay, you got a parking lot and it says, come on in, empty. All right? You all have got opportunities that a fellow like me doesn't have because you've got an opportunity to make these new clients and to charge them more modest fees because anybody who comes into your parking lot is pure profit. Because if they don't come, the space sits empty. All right? Now, what are you trying to do in building your practice? Let's go to the theme. What are you trying to do? You're trying to build your practice because when you build it and you get more and more people coming in and that parking lot finally gets full, what can you do then? You can go up on the price. You can't go up on the price till it gets full. Once it gets full, then you can say, it doesn't cost $1 an hour to park anymore, it costs $2 an hour. And they say, well, that's too much. And you say, well, that's up to you. I'm filled up. You've got a space. If you don't want it, somebody else is going to take it. All right? You want to spread that goodwill. You want to spread your name. You want to spread your identity. You want to get out in that community and be a mover and a shaker and be somebody because you want them to call on you to protect them. Now, how do you do that? Anybody going home? Anybody plan on going back to their hometown? Huh? It's hard. I went back to Charleston. I just knew all my high school friends would go come pouring in with all their problems, you know? And none of them came. They didn't come for like 10 years, okay? And I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized there was a cardiologist in town, and he had gone to high school with me, and somebody said, you know, Joe Blow is a cardiologist. I said, he's a cardiologist? Hell, he's the guy who plays the piano when we go into assembly. He can't be a cardiologist. And I realized I had a view of him of 10 years before. And guess what? That's the same view everybody had of me. Nobody had a view of me as a grown-up. They had a view of me as the last time they saw me, I was 17 years old going off to Carolina, and I was back. But hell, their image of me was 17 years old. Well, that's not who you're sending your criminal problems to. That's not who you're going to send your problems to. All right? So you got to look for ways to be visible and sell yourself in the community. You got to be sensitive to your name. All right? When you left, you might have been Joey. All right? But nobody writes a $10,000 check to Joey. My brother's nickname is Dingle. I said, man, we got to do something by that name. You know, it just doesn't work like that. You got to be sensitive to those sorts of things. Now, when you charge a fee, what we're trying to do is we're trying to, in civil and criminal, is this inverse pyramid. We're trying to spread you out. We're trying, each year, you're going to have a certain number of case opportunities. I've got my little one back here. I'll show you what I did. This is very dramatic. This is August 1st, 2001. Your caseload is 0. Okay? From here on out, each year, you're going to handle 50 cases. The question is, how many are you going to choose from? Are you going to have 75 people come to see you to be represented? And then you'll choose what? The best 50 cases. You'll say to somebody else, you know, I have slip and fall case. I've lost 2 of those. I don't need to lose 3 of them. You take that to somebody else. You weed that now. And then 5 years down the road, you got 150 cases. And you choose what? The best 50. All right? Still doing 50 cases, different cases, better liability, better damages. So in this criminal world, you're trying to be, I know this sounds, you want to be nice to people. You want to help them any way you can. And if it works out, you get to charge them a fee, that's great. You know, you do the best you can for them. But if not, you want to leave with this reservoir of goodwill. They become your emissary in the community. They become your ambassador in the community. Or they become somebody who cuts your ass and says bad stuff about you because you're entitled to it. Now, here's how you charge a fee in a criminal case. A lot of people don't take this energy and time. It's the best thing you can do. First of all, the person comes in, and you want to gather a little information about them. And the way you do that is by asking them, how long you've been working at the Navy Yard, what's your rate of pay, what's your son got a prior record, you know, and you ask that sort of stuff. And you say, listen, here's what I'm going to do with you. They want to hire you. You can't hire me today because I don't know enough about your case. It's just like saying, how much are you going to charge me to build a house? You got to see the plans for the house. Otherwise, it's just a guess. All right? Now, I'm going to see you on Thursday. And on Thursday, I will have talked to the police. And I will have heard their side of the story. And I'll tell you then what their side of the story is, what kind of trouble your son is in, a range of likely results. That's called goal setting, okay? So he doesn't set some unrealistic goal. And what I'll charge you to do it. And you can't hire me then because you're on my home court in my office. And I want you to go home and think about it. And then if you want to hire me, you come back with the money. Not 10% of the money, not 20% of the money. And this is the kind of exchange you run into. They'll say, well, can I give you half of it and then pay you the other half in 6 months? How does that work, Mr. Worley, that half in 6 months? Have you ever gotten it?
No.
No, I didn't think you had. Nobody gets the second half, all right? And you tell them the truth. You say, listen, I charge you $10,000 and you got 5 here. If I let you pay me in 6 months, I'm loaning you $5,000. Why the hell would I loan you $5,000? You know what I mean? Borrow it from the bank, borrow it from your brother, borrow it from your grandmama. I understand you got to borrow it from somebody, just don't try to borrow it from me. It's supposed to be coming to me. Now, if you do that, if you take the $5,000 and get a note for the second $5,000, can you imagine you suing a client to collect the money? You talk about bad will in the community. That's as high as it gets, all right? So you really are agreeing to do it for $5,000, which is fine if that's what you want to do it for. You got to be ready to talk to clients about money. They want to understand. What you'll say, in a serious case, you may say, I'll charge you $50,000, all right? And they go, like that. That means you hit the right number. They didn't say, ooh, you want a little shock, all right? Now, then they say, where does that come from? Well, $50,000 is a lot of money, and what's the answer to that? You're right, it is a lot of money. This is a very substantial problem. And this is what I tell them, and it isn't true. If I charge you $10,000 for this murder case, there are going to be 5 people that come in here in the next 6 months in murder cases. And I'll have 5 murder cases and $50,000. If I charge $50,000, 4 of them are going to say that's too much, and they're going to go somewhere else. And I'm going to help them. They say, Mr. Howe, that's too much. I'll give them a list of people. I'll give them recommendations. I'll tell them different options, all right? And I'll have what? 1 murder case and $50,000. Now, who's going to get the best result? Who's going to get the energy and time and opportunity to get that person the best result? And I look at them and say, you want to be 1 of 1 or you want to be 1 of 5? That's your call, okay? And then the next question is, well, is it worth it? And what's the answer is, I don't know whether it's worth it. I can tell you it's not going to be the difference between having a 50% chance or a 90% chance of getting it out. If so-and-so's, if Mr. A has got a 65% chance, my chances might be 70%, might be 75%. I have a little more experience than him, have a little bit better track record than him. I'm charging you a substantial fee. That's only 10%. Is that worth it? That's your call. All right? Now, they can't get mad at you for that. You're being straight with them. If they don't hire you, what do they say about you? All right? I wish I could have hired Gedney Howe. He was straight. Now, I like to, there's a little term, my brother and I represented a lady one time, and we were an older lady, she was cute. She said, we're talking about doing something to settle a case, and she said, we said, well, there's 2 sides of that. She said, well, there's no such thing as an unmixed motive, okay? And in our world, ladies and gentlemen, there is no such thing as an unmixed motive. Everybody's got layers of motives that promote themselves. One of the best things to do, this is how you build a practice. What do you do that night? Who's 90% of the time not at that meeting? Daddy's there, the boy's there, and who's not there? Mama, she's home taking care of the house. She's at home doing her job. And what do? Takes 5 minutes. You call her on the phone. Miss Johnson, these boys went today, and I know they tried to explain to you what was going on, and I know they didn't do a very good job because it's complicated. Let's you and I talk a little bit about the trouble your boy's in. All right? Answer her questions. Take some little genuine time. And that's why I say the unmixed motive. It's a nice thing to do. It's also good for building your practice. Because she hangs up the phone, and what does she say? God dang, that's a good lawyer. Okay? That's who the hell we want to hire. Cares about mama. All right? Now, there are thousands of examples of that. There are a couple more we're going to talk about. But you've got to be looking to promote yourself. Okay? All right? It's very competitive. You know who controls so much of the criminal work, the small criminal work, is the bondsman. All right? The bondsmen go out and write the bonds, and they're the first contact, and that's getting them out of jail. And 90% of the cases get steered where the bondsman want them to go. And if you want to do small-time criminal work and middle-sized criminal work, you better get out there and plan on hustling right in the middle with everybody else. Don't fall victim. Don't you fall victim to the opportunity of manipulating your own client, because it will come back and haunt you. It is supposed to come back and haunt you. All right? We want it to come back and haunt you because you and I are going to do a good job, and we want them to have to carry that burden of doing less than they can do for that family. Now, when you take on a criminal case, communication doesn't end at that point. It begins. You want to keep people in touch, informed, all right? And you want to set realistic goals. Goal setting is very important because if you got in mind one thing and the client has got in mind the other, what you want it to end is for the client to say, we got a satisfactory result. Not necessarily we won everything, but for them to feel like they had a satisfactory result. And if you start off with them seeing in their mind's eye one thing and you seeing something different, you're in trouble. All right? The example I like to use is the guy who comes into the family court lawyer and says, I want custody of my 3 children. He says, well, I'll see what I can do. Tell me a little about them. Well, there are 3 girls, 3, 9, and 12. And you want custody of them from your wife? Right? The best thing a lawyer can do and the fairest thing you can do is say, buddy, I'll do the best I can, but I can't do that. I can get you visitation. I can get you, some time in the summer, but unless you got something overwhelming, I can't get your children, and by the way, neither can anybody else. That's an unrealistic goal. It's very important because clients, unless you teach them what a realistic goal is, they'll set this unrealistic goal, and then they'll hold you accountable for having failed. You didn't reach it. All right? So that's got to be out front talk. That's got to be stuff you think out and talk out with them. Now, criminal work lasts a long time. Cases take long periods of time. You generally are charging that lump sum up front. One of the things that happens to people, and it's human nature in a very reasonable way, if you're a year out from having gotten that $10,000 fee, it just looks like a little dot on the horizon that was a long, long time ago. And what you do is you sort of slow up. You don't work as hard on that file because it's been a long time since you got paid, and you're sort of saying, God dang, man, I'm getting killed in this case. I mean, on a per-hour basis, this and all this. I mean, I got so much time. But that ain't the point. The point is you took on the case to take it to satisfactory conclusion. You set the fee, all right? And I say to you in a good-hearted way, you really did emotionally and legally obligate yourself to do a good job. You got to do a good job. You got to not back up one iota. Now, I say to you on that mixed motive, selfish way, all right? You better do a good job or you send another emissary out in that community who doesn't like you, who's going to say bad stuff about you, and it's going to really, really hurt your practice. This is pretty sophisticated stuff so far, huh? This is the 55-gallon drum. This is where they burn, where all the workmen stand around at night and there's a fire in it. All right? And somebody says, my brother lost his foot. Got cut off by a trucking accident. There's 10 boys there. And they're all talking, and they're all shooting the breeze. About a half of them are chewing tobacco. And one of them says, I think I'm going to send him to Gedney Howe. And 9 of them say, boy, that guy's a good lawyer. He's great. And the 10th one says, he was sort of rude to my assistant, and he didn't return her phone calls. Do I get the business? Hell no. Why would I get the business? Why would anybody put up with that crap from me? Doesn't know me, doesn't owe me anything. All right? That'll put you out of business. And you know what? You don't even know it took place. You don't even know it happened. I'm telling you now it's going to happen. You let somebody down. You lead them to believe. You set a goal for them, which is an unrealistic goal. You say, I owe some money on my house, and I'm going to tell that guy I'm going to get him those 3 little girls, bring me $25,000. And he is going to cuss you up and down Charleston, South Carolina for the rest of your damn life. He's going to haunt you. All right? Don't do it. Play it straight. All right? And there's this great, my dad's great line, he said, they never said honesty is morally right. They never said honesty will get you into heaven. He said honesty is a good policy. All right? And I'm here to tell you, it's a good policy. It keeps you in business. Be straight because it's good for you. Now, I did a little talk at my daughter's school a couple of years ago. When this was the pitch to the girls. Your girlfriend's supposed to pick you up, and she comes by and picks you up on the way to school every morning 100% of the time. What do you call her? Reliable. She's a reliable person. If she picks you up 25% of the time, what do you call her? Unreliable. 50% of the time. Unreliable. 95% of the time. Unreliable. This is, guys like us, we hold these nuggets on other fellas. You gotta be straight 100% of the time. If they say, what about so-and-so? Hey, he's all right. He's pretty straight. That's a kiss of death. What the hell is pretty straight? That means less than straight. Okay? Yeah, you can count on them most of the time. I don't want to screw around with people I can count on most of the damn time. They can count on me all of the time. And I expect to count on them, or what do? It's a big marketplace where there are thousands of us out there. I just go pick somebody else to work with. I refer a small criminal case. I get tons of that stuff, and I send it out to the young lawyers. If they do a good job, work hard, I'll send them some more. If somebody calls me and says, Gedney, would you call Jack Swirling for me? I know you sent me to him, and I'm having a little trouble getting him to call me back. I make the call to Jack, and I never call him again. Why the hell would I call him and send him any more business? There's more trouble than it's worth. You don't know it again. You just struck out. You just had a hunk of your livelihood taken away, and you don't even know it. All right? If you're going to do these referrals from other lawyers, you got to deliver. You got to be reliable. How much? How often? 100% of the time. How long? Forever. At the end of 20 years, you don't become less reliable. There's no flexibility on that. You don't become less predictable. All right? Now, so criminal work is people work. Y'all can't read this, and y'all aren't supposed to read this. This is really for me. I'm going to tell you one little self-promotion criminal story, which will keep it, or you'll look for this opportunity to use it. People don't get what we do, you know. They just don't get it. And there's one question, probably y'all haven't been asked a whole lot yet, but you can guarantee it's going to be asked, particularly after a 2-drink cocktail. Somebody's going to say, tell me something, Gedney. How do you represent somebody, you know, come on, that you really know is guilty? How do you do that? And you can talk to them. And now the answer is, well, you know, the people I represent have been charged with crimes, and they are not innocent, but they are presumed innocent. And the only way to lose that presumption is to plead guilty or to be found guilty. Until then, they are presumed innocent. Now, that's something I cultivate at a cocktail party. A little less now, but I still do it. I want them to remember me. I am promoting myself. I don't know how else I can lead you into that, all right? There's no interest like self-interest, and my self-interest is to go there and have a dozen people leave saying, hey, did you meet that damn guy Howe? He sure seems like he's full up with the law, all right? So I'll promote myself, and I'll get that question. And we'll dance it around and fence it around a little bit, and then I really hit them. I said, buddy, let me ask you something. Got any kids? Yeah, I got some kids. How old are they? 12 and 16. Wife love them pretty good? I said, yeah. Tell you what I'm going to do for you. If they ever get arrested, and you want to make sure that justice is done, and if they're wrong, they're punished, don't call me. You want somebody to go get their ass out of jail and bring them home to your crying wife and to keep her from jumping off the side of the Cook River Bridge? I'm your man. Don't forget my name. And I'm telling you, makes it all worthwhile. About 3 o'clock in the morning, you get that call, Mr. Howe, I met you at a cocktail party, and this is the hardest call I ever had to make. But you told me you could go get my boy, and he's in the jail, okay? Now, what am I trying to communicate to y'all, all right? Criminal work's about representing individuals. It's about having good relationships with them. It's about being straight with them. It's about turning them into your emissary in the community, turning them into your advocate in the community, because they're going to be there when they're standing around that 55-gallon drum, and they got to say something good about you. Everybody, one dissenting vote, and you're out. Now, civil work, I think it's important to remember you're always a lawyer. That Saturday morning stuff, when you haven't shaved and you go to the hardware store and you got on some flip-flops and you're a little hungover, I'll put you out of business, okay? You just can't look like a knucklehead, okay? People want a lawyer that they look up to and that they admire as a person, and I'm not saying you can't wear khaki pants, but I am saying you've got to look like a lawyer, particularly those first 10 years. I guess at some level you can sort of grow past it when you become, you know, busy enough, but that's a long ways away from y'all. So I think that being a lawyer all the time and being aware of that is very important. when you start to set up your office, people have a sense sometimes that it's sort of like their living room where they can express themselves or be creative or have this decorative flair. That's just as wrong as it gets, okay? Your office is for the purpose of putting the client at ease. The way you put the client at ease is he's got some expectations of what a law office looks like. Don't you have some expectations of what a law office looks like? If you walk in somebody's office and there's chrome and glass and some interesting sculpture, say, this guy really likes art, okay? What you want to do is you want to dress your office in a way that will fulfill the expectations of the people that are your clients, because it can differ from one community to another. And I laugh about this. If you go in a Berkeley County office, there's going to be a picture of a dog on the wall, okay? And everybody's going to come in and say, nice dog, all right? It's going to make them comfortable with you. It can have dead things hanging out of his mouth. That's fine, okay? Just don't try that in Columbia, all right? It ain't going to work, all right? Do those things. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is going to come as a great surprise for you all. Guess what? I got a big old fancy damn office, okay? And I built it big and I built it fancy. So when people come in, you know what they say? This guy must be a good lawyer. It got nothing in the world to do with whether I'm a good lawyer, does it? All right? But it fills their expectations plus. So they equate that to success, and they equate that success to ability. All right? Now, is it true? Whether it's true or not is a subject of great debate. All right? But it works with clients. So when you sit down to fix up your office, let's say you went to Yale and you hang that Yale graduation certificate up. Nobody cares. Now, if you're at Nelson Mullins, you might want to hang that. If you're doing what I'm talking about doing, stick it in the closet. You know, I mean, it just isn't going to make that big a deal. Charles Williams in Orangeburg, my buddy, has had a picture of him, and on one side was Rehnquist, that's at Fourth Circuit, and on the other side was Warren Burger. And everybody who came in said, who are those two guys with Charles? Okay? Charles has got dog pictures in his room. He knows they belong there. All right? Charles got something else. Got a picture of him and Dale Earnhardt. That carries some weight in Orangeburg. Okay? Now, I know I'm teasing with y'all, but I want y'all to understand what I'm telling you. It's not about you. It's not your office. It's their office. All right? And this leads into my next big pitch. You can be humble. You got to really, if you're doing well, the better you're doing, the more you got to work at it. You got to, your friends can't see you sort of moving away from them. But if you get the client coffee, help them answer their questions, take time with them, do all of those things that you're supposed to do, but somebody at the front desk is a pain in the ass and you don't know it, she'll put you out of business. Okay? She's answering that phone if everybody comes in, and you, who are doing all the work, you keep it in perspective, and she gets the big head because she's sitting out front like she's got something to do with the damn success of the office. And so all of a sudden, she starts treating everybody like hell, and you don't know it. All right? Here's how you do that. You have a meeting once a year, and you say, let's get something straight. We are the employee, and the client is the employer. We work for them. If anybody complains and says you are discourteous, you are fired. I'm not going to look into it. I'm not going to review it. I'm not going to argue with them. If somebody feels sufficiently offended, because like beauty, it's in the eye of the beholder. If somebody perceives you as being rude, that ends it right there. You're gone. Haven't had any trouble. All right, so no failure to communicate there. All right? Stay in charge of that office. You can do the best you can do, but if you're letting any of it sort of run amok, it's going to come back and haunt you. Now, why does the client hire you? What are they looking for? Well, actually, we all make this mistake. Clients want a fighter, okay? We tend to think, and some lawyers promote themselves, that a fighter is equivalent to being mean as hell, okay? What this is all about, what you want to grow up into, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are you looking to grasp out all this? It's all about good judgment, It's all about exercising good judgment, being given a given set of facts for a client, helping them analyze it, giving them advice, and having good judgment. Meanness and good judgment are the exact opposite of each other. Clients will say, I want a mean lawyer. They want a tough lawyer. They want a hard, rough negotiator. But they want judgment. And if you get just plain meanness, and there's some of it out there, okay? All right? There's some of it out there. If you just get meanness, good judgment goes out the window. So clients want hard work, they want enthusiasm, but they want this sort of depth of commitment. Now, here's how you give them that, or here's how you make them perceive that they've got it. It is perception. You give them the perception by, in fact, delivering, by not faking it. All right? Now, let's talk about a few little simple things. Personal injury work is what everybody on the people's side, that's the primary source of income. You do some criminal work, but generally the PI work is where you make a living. And those files open and sometimes stay open for long periods of time. The first thing you start off with again is you start off with this sense of goals and goal setting. If somebody's got a broken leg and they got a cast on it and the doctor says it's a clean break and he's got $30,000 worth of medical, and they say, I want $500,000, you got to be ready to say, well, I understand you've been hurting bad, and I understand it's been hard on you, but here's how the system works, and the law's going to allow you recovery, and it wouldn't, that's not going to happen. That's an unrealistic goal. You got $30,000 worth of medical, a range would be $75,000 to $150,000 might be a range, but it would be highly unlikely that we'd ever recover $500,000. And if they say, well, that makes sense to me, and I understand that, you want to represent them. If they say, well, I owe that on the house and the refrigerator, and I got to get the car paid off, and you say, well, that really doesn't have anything to do with the value of your case. Your debts do not control. Well, and you can see this emotional commitment, this being invested in this number, all right? As tempting as it is, you don't want to represent that person. You just say, Ms. Johnson, I tell you, I wish you the very best. You and I are on different wavelengths. I hope somebody can get you that amount of money. But if I tell you I want to represent you and you set a goal of $500,000, I'm leading you to believe that's going to happen. And I don't think it's going to happen. Okay? And it ain't going to happen. Right? Because you know that. It's just like, here's how you set the value of a case. You got a house right here that sold for $90,000 and a house over here that sold for $92,000, and you got the house in the middle and your lady wants $500,000 for it. It just ain't happening. All right? The system works better than that. It isn't going to let it happen. You got to tell her that, or tell him that. If you take it on, you're just taking on a piece of hell, and you're going, 2 years from now, you're going to hear my voice in your ear. One of the things people do wrong is get themselves in personal financial trouble. There are no secrets in our world. No secrets. You got a problem, everybody in the law business knows about it. All right? It's an awful gossip, or it's great gossip, depending on how much you like gossip. But if you get in financial trouble, and I mean by that, you got a $90,000 note over there and you rolled it twice. You all know what that means, rolling the note? That means you don't pay it off and you get some more time. All right? You got a $90,000 note that you use to open that office. And here's how it'll happen. All right? I'll give you this. You're borrowing $100,000. Open your office. Put your rent down. Buy your furniture. And because you just know you're going to be good at this, you start paying yourself a salary. You ain't done a damn thing yet. Nobody's come in the door, and you're paying yourself $500 a week. Well, of course, you got to have $500 a week to live on, so you let that control. So all of a sudden, 10 weeks had passed, all right? You spent all this money, and you finally got a case. Let's say your case is worth $75,000. Oh, no, let's say your case is worth $150,000. $150,000. Insurance company says, we'll pay $75,000. You say, that's not enough. They know you owe that money at the bank. They know the note's been rolled twice. I'm telling you, there are no secrets. Okay? And they know you're going to take that $75,000. Not because it's the value of the case, but you need the $25,000 fee. You got me? You got no leverage left. They got the leverage on you. You got a $150,000 case, which they'll pay, and it's going to take 6 months to a year. All right? But you don't have to stay in power. The client's got to stay in power. And so does that affect your judgment? Hell yes. Does it affect it adversely? Hell yes. Does the client suffer as a result of that? Absolutely. Do sooner or later they figure that out? Yes, yes, yes. And hold you accountable for it. So when I say be careful of your personal finances, I'm not talking about buying 3 suits when 2 suits will do. I'm talking about getting yourself in financial trouble. We always talk to it as being one of us, a lawyer, or one of them, people in trouble. Okay? You move from being one of us to being one of them. Because we know what financial problems do to your clients, don't they? They paralyze them. Okay? Well, guess what? They do the same damn thing to you. It affects your productivity. It affects your judgment. And so you have to be extremely careful, particularly at first, not to get overextended financially. Personal injury cases, in a criminal case, you generally are not the initiator. The court is the solicitor is the initiator. He's the one trying to make the case go forward. Generally, if you guys out on bond, time is on your side. You want it to take as longer, it gets older and it gets colder, and it's to your advantage. On the plaintiff side, on the personal injury side, you've got to move the case forward for the exact opposite reason. The defense lawyer is getting paid by the hour. His bills are getting paid every month, and you ain't getting nothing until that case is over. So you got to show, you got to be the initiator, but it's not just wild and crazy initiation. You got to have a plan. You got to be taking depositions. You got to be doing these things that are proactive. One of the things you do is teach your client how to be a good plaintiff. Right? Now, what happens is this, and this is how I learned this lesson. Like all lessons, I learned it the hard way. You go into you're trying this case, and the lady takes a stand and says, you know, my back hurts, and it's been hurting me, and I've been taking some Flexeril. And so the guy comes up on cross-examination and says, Miss So-and-so, you got given a prescription for Flexeril 8 months ago. You got 10 of them. I said, yeah. How many you got left? Out of 10, 8 months. Well, I got 3 left. So she took 7 pills in 8 months, and she's complaining of pain. What do you do when you got pain? You take your damn medicine. If you don't take your medicine, what does it mean? You ain't got pain. Okay? So you got to say, now, Miss So-and-so, when you get a prescription, you got to take those pills now, or nobody's going to believe you're hurt. And then you go through, and she says, he says, now, Dr. So-and-so, you say she's got this back problem. Yeah. You saw her on November the 12th. Yep. And what does your note say? Doesn't it say right here, doing fine? Yep. Saw on November the 19th, doing better. Saw on December the 12th, much improved. Because when you go to see a doctor, doctors like to make you well. So you go in and you say, my back hurts, my arm hurts, my leg hurts, but other than that, I'm doing better. What does he write down? Doing better. Now, what do you do about that? You teach the client. You say, you tell him exactly what I'm telling you all. You say, listen now, when you go in there, you know, Dr. Rustin's a nice guy and he likes you. You cannot use those terms, much improved, doing better. You look at him and say, my back hurts. Don't you want to write that down? All right? My arm is still hurting. Now, how do you get them ready to do that? You know, there's this sense with non-lawyers that what I'm talking to you all about is how to get them to say something that's not true. That's not what I'm talking about. I just want them to say what is true. All right? And here's what you tell her. Ms. Jones, you and your husband sit down the night before and talk about the problems you're still having. Take an index card. Don't get a sheet of paper. You'll scare the doctor to death. Get an index card and write down the 5 key problems you're continuing to have. And if he asks you, if you cover 2 of them and you get off on another track, come back and get those other 3 in the record. I want all 5 of them in the record. It can be any 5 that are true. If you ain't got 5, you only got 4, that's okay. But the reason you write them down is because if you don't, you're going to go through 2 of them and you're going to get distracted and it's going to be boop, gone like it didn't happen. You're not going to get paid for it. And you know what? You're supposed to get paid for it because you really are hurt. But just being hurt isn't enough. You've got to be thinking about You got to be thinking about the trial of that case. You got to literally be saying a year and a half before the case has even been brought, how's this doctor going to sound on cross-examination? How is this information going to come in? How am I going to get it in? How's it going to sound? All right? I got to get her to take that medicine. I got to teach her how to be a good plaintiff. All right? When you do that, you're projecting out a year later when Dr. Rustin's on the stand and he goes to those notes. It doesn't have any of that doing better. Says back still hurting, difficulty, has trouble walking, problems with stairs, whatever it is. All right? But that's you practicing law. Another extreme example. Don't see a lot of it, thank goodness, but an extreme example, and to give you a sense of what I'm talking about, are burns. Burns are sort of the worst injury. Terrible burns, all terrible. And at the Medical University, they have a little thing they call a tank. It's a bunch of iodine, and they drop you down in the tank and debride. That's what hard brushes scrub off all the dead flesh. Do that about twice a day. It's awful. We got a relationship with the Medical University. We got a medical authorization already approved to go video that. Now, we've done that about a dozen times. None of those cases have ever been to trial. They all get settled. Because when they see that video, they don't want none of that. All right? Now, what's the objection going to be? The objection is going to be that it is, what's the word for it? Incendiary, or whatever it is. And its incendiary nature outweighs its probative value. Okay? And so the question about whether it's going to come in. That's where you got to really see it's information that you want to turn into evidence. All right? So you got this information, you got these pictures, still pictures and video pictures. How do you get them into evidence? All right? If you go see that doctor before you bring the complaint, a year and a half in advance of the case, you talk to him and say, Doc, I need to get this into evidence. He said, yeah. I said, are these accurate photographs? Oh, yeah, this accurate video. Is this what he went through? Yeah. Well, will you say that these photographs help you explain this man's injuries? If he'll say that, it comes in. All right? Now, what my lesson to you is you got to be thinking about that a year and a half, 2 years in advance to teach that doctor what you want. All right? And then you got to not just, if he says, yeah, I can do that, you don't just drop it and come back and see him in 18 months. You make a follow-up appointment in 60 days and find some excuse to come over there to see him, and it can be an excuse because all you want to do is cop a fast on again that he is going to say that those photographs and that video are illustrative of his condition and help the doctor explain to the jury his condition, because you can't let that not get in. That's too important. You follow me? All right? Now, so much of the criminal world is reactionary. You are pretty passive, waiting on the Solicitor Act and then you to come in and respond to it. On the personal injury side, there's lots of room for lawyering. There's lots of room to make this case better. All right? And those taking video, something as simple as having a medical authorization ready that once he signs it can be approved can get you in there 3 weeks sooner. What we do, we have tons of, probably a dozen at any one time, disposable cameras in the office. And we'll go over and say, here are 4 disposable cameras, take a dozen pictures twice a week. All right? We are documenting the person's condition. You don't want Polaroids. Why don't you want Polaroids? You can't blow them up. Okay? All right? You want digital, and you want the people. They're changing bandages at all these odd times, and you can't just sit there and wait on it, and you don't particularly want it anyway. You give the cameras to the mom and say, when they change the bandages, take a bunch of pictures for us. All right? That's you being proactive, making the case better. Not making it up, but through your hard work, improving the value of the case. Value of the case, these are the things we think about. Liability, damages, proximate cause, recoverability. Those are the 4 things you're working on. Liability, you've got to have an investigator. Choosing an investigator, we don't have an in-house investigator because it depends on the case. It depends on where the accident happened, what jurisdiction it is. I mean, we got retired city police officers, we got retired county police officers, we got retired DEA people, all right? If you want some information from a businessman, and you send your DEA guy and they're all dressed up, you look like $1 million. You got a cop who investigated a case who was with the Charleston County Police, you get a Charleston County retired detective to help you go out and investigate the case. You work on the liability. Liability is measured this way. If you have a 50-50 chance of winning a case and it's got a $10,000 value and you're trying to settle it, what's it worth? Worth about $5,000. You're going to lose 1 out of 2. All right? But if you go out and get that good witness and you go out and get a statement and you develop a relationship with him and you find out, by God, he went to the same high school you did, and your sister knows your sister, ooh, then you're going somewhere. Okay, now you're practicing law. All right? All of a sudden, you've gotten that liability, that statement that was adverse has been softened a little bit, and you have jumped your case from a 50-50 chance and went into probably 75-25 because he's more favorable than he was. All right? You're working on that liability. While you're working on the liability, you're working on the damages, the stuff we're talking about. How do we enhance the value of the case? Lots of photographs, good relationship with the physician, going to see the physician, letting him know you're invested in the case, finding out, sending a good investigator out to go to contact this lady's 15 or 20 best friends to get summaries from them on how active she was and how this amputation is going to dramatically affect her life. Working on that part of the case, all right? And then the proximate cause. Proximate cause is a big deal in malpractice cases. Most other cases it is. And then finally, recoverability. Because if it's all about somebody who's got $15,000 worth of coverage or $25,000 worth of coverage now, you look at the client and say, Miss So-and-so, this guy is judgment proof. He's driving his own car. There's nobody else. He's in a household with nobody else. Looks like he's got about $25,000 worth of coverage. I'm very sorry. I don't think this is something you need a lawyer for. My recommendation is you let me turn the file back over to you. They'll pay you the $25,000. Then you don't have to pay a legal fee because nobody's done anything to earn a legal fee. Oh, you're adding to that pyramid, aren't you? Huh? Just made a new friend, didn't I? Okay? And that's just the best you're going to be able to do. Shooting straight, not trying to take advantage of it. Now, we got 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a great story about a truck driver. And this fellow said to his friend, he said, I need you to take this to California for me. I said, why me? He said, well, you're a truck driver and you drive to California. He said, no, man, I don't drive to California. That's too damn far. I drive to Atlanta. Once I get to Atlanta, I drive to St. Louis. And from St. Louis, I drive to Denver. Now, when I get to Denver, then I drive to California. All right? Because California is just too far. Now, I want to talk to you all, and this is my closing comments. This is a really good way to spend the day. Practicing law is fun. It just surprised me. I mean, I get up in the morning, I go run into the office early. It's dark. I'm like a factory worker. It's dark when I go, and it's dark when I get home, okay? But it's a great way to spend the day. I don't think I could, I'm like the truck driver, though. I don't think I can say I'm going to work my ass off for the next 30 years. Because it's too damn long, okay? And I got a little trick, which I'll share with you all, and it's something to consider. And you don't commit yourself to 30 years worth of practice. Commit yourself to 1 year of practice. Because 1 year of practice is like a 100-yard dash. You can go hard. You can go hard the whole year because you're only committing for a year. So you take a little time between Christmas and New Year's, and you ask the question, do I want to be a lawyer for another year? And the second question comes, I don't do this, just what the hell am I going to do? Okay, I can sell stocks, I can make cold calls, I can be a life insurance agent. Man, this practice in law is looking better and better, all right? And I say to myself, all right, I think I want to do this for another year. I always pick up a couple of things to improve on. Sometimes you'll get, as you grow, you have fewer opportunities to go to magistrate's court. And I'll say, this year I'm going to get my butt back into the magistrate's court some and be more visible at the lower levels. And you do that just by, your friends will call and you say, I'll do that for you, as opposed to referring them out. And I make a commitment, not to anybody but me. I make a commitment that for 1 more year, I'm going to be as big an ass kicker as I can, okay? I'm going to get there early. I'm going to stay there late. I'm going to try to exercise good judgment, but when I got a position, good position, I'm holding on. We ain't budging, and I'm going to be solicitous of my clients, and I'm going to be engaged with their problems, just like I want you to do this coming year. Your very first year, I try to recapture that enthusiasm so that it's not old hat, so that it's not repetitious, so that it really is interesting and fun. And I can tell you at the end of a good many years, it can still be fun. And I recommend it to you, and I welcome you to the profession. Thanks.
15-minute break. Shh, boy, a quick hush. I like that. That's good. All right, we're all doing okay? How's upstairs doing? I understand it's full upstairs too. That's amazing. But y'all, you know the auditorium in the old law school, right? When in law school, is this better or worse? Because this is the first time we've done it here. This is better? Okay. All right. All right. To my immediate, we're going to be talking now about management of law practice. We got people from 3 different perspectives who run 3 different types of firms. To my immediate left is William Booth. He's a member of the Booth Law Firm. He's admitted to South Carolina Bar in 1975. His primary practice areas are real estate transactions, civil litigation, corporate law, property tax, and low-income housing tax credits, and Section 1031 exchanges. He's a graduate of Carolina, 1975 University of South Carolina School of Law, member of the Moot Court Board. He was a law clerk for Supreme Court Justice William Rhodes in 1975 to 1976. He has served as chairperson of the solo and small firm section of the bar and as chairperson of the Law Office Technology Committee. He was one of the people instrumental in developing the casemaker legal research system that the bar has. In 2005, he was appointed by Governor Sanford to the newly established E-Government Oversight Committee. And reappointed in 2007. He's been a planner and moderator for numerous seminars and one of our more popular speakers. To his immediate left, who will be second, is Brenda Stewart. Brenda has come up here from Greenville. She's been on the program with us for a number of years as well. She's the director of marketing and client services for Smith Moore Leatherwood LLP, one of our more distinguished law firms in South Carolina. The firm has more than 170 lawyers and 400 employees. She has over 23 years of legal management experience, served law firms in various sizes. Her primary responsibility is firm-wide marketing standards and branding guidelines, management and coordination of firm advertising and public relations, develop of marketing collateral like website brochures and newsletters, and coordination of business development efforts. She's a frequent speaker at seminars, immediate past president of the Association of Legal Administrators, and she's also on the South Carolina Commission on Lawyers' Conduct as a non-lawyer member. We have non-lawyer members on there. To her left is J. Calhoun Watson, who is a member, partner in the law firm of Sal, Gray, Stepp, and Lafitte, one of our outstanding firms here in Columbia. His area of practice is commercial litigation, class actions, and professional negligence. He's a summa cum laude graduate of Wofford in 1984, cum laude graduate of University of South Carolina School of Law in 1987. He was the Order of Coif, Order of the Wig and Robe, and student works editor of the Law Review. He also served as a legal writing instructor. He clerked for one of my favorite judges, the Honorable Robert Chapman, Judge, United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, and was also here on the District Court. Calhoun has been on the House of Bar Delegates, President of South Carolina Bar Foundation, and past President of Young Lawyers Division of the South Carolina Bar. We have some outstanding people here, 2 outstanding lawyers and an outstanding manager of the firm. Please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Swirly. Appreciate that introduction. You always do a great job talking about me. Again, let me introduce myself. I'm Bill Booth, and today just happens to be my 11th anniversary of starting my solo practice, now known as the Booth Law Firm. I got to pick the name. Thank you. As you will see from my materials, prior to that, I was with a small firm, four of us, for about 18 years. And you can clap too, I am 63 years of age and still kicking strong. Thank you, yeah, I know Calvin said it. According to the wording on the framed license hanging on my wall in my office, I was admitted to practice on November 11, 1975. Now, before I give you some highlights from my materials, I will entertain